Section 7 of The Wood Beyond the World. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information and to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Corey Samuel. The Wood Beyond the World by William Morris. Chapter 19. Walter Goes to Fetch Home the Lion's Hide. He entered the cool dusk through the porch, and, looking down the pillared hall, saw, beyond the fountain, a gleam of gold. And when he came past the said fountain, he looked up to the high seat, and lo, the lady sitting there, clad in her queenly raiment. She called to him, and he came, and she hailed him, and spake graciously and calmly, yet as if she knew nought of him, save as the leal servant of her, a high lady. "Squire," she said, "we have deemed it meet to have the hide of the servant of the enemy, the lion to wit, whom thou slewest yesterday, for a carpet to our feet. Wherefore go now, take thy wood knife, and flay the beast, and bring me home his skin. This shall be all thy service for this day. So mayest thou do it at thine own leisure, and not weary thyself. May good go with thee." He bent the knee before her, and she smiled on him graciously, but reached out no hand for him to kiss, and heeded him but little. Wherefore, in spite of himself, and though he knew somewhat of her guile, he could not help marvelling that this should be she who had lain in his arms night long but of late. Howso that might be, he took his way toward the thicket where he had slain the lion, and came thither by then it was afternoon, at the hottest of the day. So he entered therein, and came to the very place whereas the lady had lain, when she fell down before the terror of the lion, and there was the mark of her body on the grass where she had lain that while, like as it were the form of a hare. But when Walter went on to where he had slain that great beast, lo, he was gone, and there was no sign of him, but there were Walter's own footprints, and the two shafts which he had shot, one feathered red and one blue. He said at first, "Belike some one hath been here, and hath had the carcass away." Then he laughed in very despite, and said, "How may that be, since there are no signs of dragging away of so huge a body, and no blood or fur on the grass if they had cut him up, and moreover no trampling of feet, as if there had been many men at the deed?" Then was he all abashed, and again laughed in scorn of himself, and said, "Forsooth I deemed I had done manly, but now forsooth I shot nought, and nought there was before the sword of my father's son. And what may I deem now, but that this is a land of mere lies, and that there is nought real and alive therein save me? Yea, belike even these trees, and the green grass, will presently depart from me, and leave me falling down through the clouds." Therewith he turned away, and gat him to the road that led to the Golden House, wondering what next should befall him, and going slowly as he pondered his case. So came he to that first thicket where they had lost their quarry by water. So he entered the same, musing, and bathed him in the pool that was therein, after he had wandered about it a while, and found nothing new. So again he set him to the homeward road, when the day was now waning, and it was near sunset that he was come nigh unto the house, though it was hidden from him as then by a low bent that rose before him, and there he abode and looked about him. Now as he looked, over the said bent came the figure of a woman, who stayed on the brow thereof, and looked all about her, and then ran swiftly down to meet Walter, who saw at once that it was the Maid. She made no stay then till she was but 3 paces from him, and then she stooped down and made the sign to him, and then spake to him breathlessly, and said: "Hearken, but speak not till I have done. I bade thee to night's meeting, because I saw that there was one anigh whom I must needs beguile. But by thine oath, and thy love, and all that thou art, I adjure thee, come not unto me this night as I bade thee, but be hidden in the hazel copse outside the house, as it draws toward midnight, and abide me there. Dost thou hearken, and wilt thou? Say yes or no in haste, for I may not tarry a moment of time. Who knoweth what is behind me?" "Yes," said Walter hastily, "but friend and love—" "No more," she said, "hope the best." And turning from him, she ran away swiftly, not by the way she had come, but sideways, as though to reach the house by fetching a compass. But Walter went slowly on his way, thinking within himself that now, at that present moment, there was nought for it but to refrain him from doing, and to let others do. Yet deemed he that it was little manly to be as the pawn upon the board, pushed about by the will of others. Then, as he went, he bethought him of the maiden's face and aspect, as she came running to him, and stood before him for that minute, and all eagerness he saw in her, and sore love of him, and distress of soul, all blent together. So came he to the brow of the bent, whence he could see lying before him, scarce more than a bowshot away, the golden house, now gilded again and reddened by the setting sun. And even therewith came a gay image toward him, flashing back the level rays from gold and steel and silver, and lo, there was come the King's Son. They met presently, and the King's Son turned to go beside him, and said merrily: "I give thee good even, my lady's squire. I owe thee something of courtesy, whereas it is by thy means that I shall be made happy, both to night and to morrow, and many to morrows, and sooth it is that but little courtesy have I done thee hitherto." His face was full of joy, and the eyes of him shone with gladness. He was a goodly man, but to Walter he seemed an ill one, and he hated him so much that he found it no easy matter to answer him. But he refrained himself, and said: "I can thee thank, King's Son, and good it is that some one is happy in this strange land." "Art thou not happy then, squire of my lady?" said the other. Walter had no mind to show this man his heart, nay, nor even a corner thereof, for he deemed him an enemy. So he smiled sweetly, and somewhat foolishly, as a man luckily in love, and said: "O yea, yea, why should I not be so? How might I be otherwise?" "Yea then," said the King's Son, "why didst thou say that thou wert glad some one is happy? Who is unhappy, deemest thou?" And he looked on him keenly. Walter answered slowly: "Said I so? I suppose then that I was thinking of thee, for when I first saw thee, yea, and afterwards, thou didst seem heavy hearted and ill content." The face of the King's Son cleared at this word, and he said: "Yea, so it was. For look you, both ways it was. I was unfree, and I had sown the true desire of my heart, whereas it waxed not. But now I am on the brink and verge of freedom, and presently shall my desire be blossomed. Nay now, squire, I deem thee a good fellow, though it may be somewhat of a fool, so I will no more speak riddles to thee. Thus it is, the Maid hath promised me all mine asking, and is mine, and in 2 or 3 days, by her helping also, I shall see the world again." Quoth Walter, smiling askance on him: "And the Lady? What shall she say to this matter?" The King's son reddened, but smiled falsely enough, and said, "Sir Squire, thou knowest enough not to need to ask this. Why should I tell thee that she accounteth more of thy little finger than of my whole body? Now I tell thee hereof freely, first, because this my fruition of love, and my freeing from thraldom, is, in a way, of thy doing. For thou art become my supplanter, and hast taken thy place with yonder lovely tyrant. Fear not for me, she will let me go. As for thyself, see thou to it. But again I tell thee hereof, because my heart is light and full of joy, and telling thee will pleasure me, and cannot do me any harm. For if thou say, How if I carry the tale to my lady? I answer, Thou wilt not. For I know that thine heart hath been somewhat set on the jewel that my hand holdeth, and thou knowest well on whose head the lady's wrath would fall, and that would be neither thine nor mine." "Thou sayest sooth," said Walter, "neither is treason my want." So they walked on silently a while, and then Walter said: "But how if the maiden had nay said thee? What hadst thou done then?" "By the heavens," said the King's son fiercely, "she should have paid for her naysay, then would I—" But he broke off, and said quietly, yet somewhat doggedly, "Why talk of what might have been? She gave me her yeasay pleasantly and sweetly." Now Walter knew that the man lied, so he held his peace thereon; but presently he said: "When thou art free, wilt thou go to thine own land again?" "Yea," said the King's son, "she will lead me thither." "And wilt thou make her thy lady and queen when thou comest to thy father's land?" said Walter. The King's son knit his brow, and said: "When I am in mine own land, I may do with her what I will; but I look for it that I shall do no otherwise with her, than that she shall be well content." Then the talk between them dropped, and the King's son turned off toward the wood, singing and joyous. But Walter went soberly toward the house. Forsooth he was not greatly cast down, for besides that he knew that the King's son was false, he deemed that under this double tryst lay something which was a-doing in his own behalf. Yet was he eager and troubled, if not downhearted, and his soul was cast about betwixt hope and fear. CHAPTER 20. Walter is bidden to another tryst. So came he into the pillared hall, and there he found the Lady walking to and fro by the high seat. And when he drew nigh, she turned on him, and said in a voice rather eager than angry: "What hast thou done, Squire? Why art thou come before me?" He was abashed, and bowed before her, and said: "O gracious Lady, thou badest me service, and I have been about it." She said: "Tell me then, tell me what hath betided." "Lady," said he, "when I entered the thicket of thy swooning, I found there no carcase of the lion, nor any sign of the dragging away of him." She looked full in his face for a little, and then went to her chair, and sat down therein, and in a little while spake to him in a softer voice, and said: "Did I not tell thee that some enemy had done that unto me? And lo, now thou seest that so it is." Then was she silent again, and knit her brows, and set her teeth, and thereafter she spake harshly and fiercely: "But I will overcome her, and make her days evil, but keep death away from her, that she may die many times over, and know all the sicknesses of the heart, when foes be nigh, and friends afar, and there is none to deliver." Her eyes flashed, and her face was dark with anger; but she turned, and caught Walter's eyes, and the sternness of his face, and she softened at once, and said: "But thou, this hath little to do with thee, and now to thee I speak. Now cometh even and night. Go thou to thy chamber, and there shalt thou find raiment worthy of thee, what thou now art, and what thou shalt be. Do on the same, and make thyself most goodly, and then come thou hither, and eat and drink with me, and afterwards depart whither thou wilt, till the night has worn to its midmost, and then come thou to my chamber, to wit, through the ivory door in the gallery above. And then and there shall I tell thee a thing, and it shall be for the weal both of thee and of me, but for the grief and woe of the enemy." Therewith she reached her hand to him, and he kissed it, and departed, and came to his chamber, and found raiment there before rich beyond measure. And he wondered if any new snare lay therein, yet if there were, he saw no way whereby he might escape it. So he did it on, and became as the most glorious of kings, and yet lovelier than any king of the world. Sithence he went his way into the pillared hall, when it was now night, and without the moon was up, and the trees of the wood as still as images. But within the hall shone bright with many candles, and the fountain glittered in the light of them, as it ran tinkling sweetly into the little stream, and the silvern bridges gleamed, and the pillars shone all round about. And there on the dais was a table dight most royally, and the Lady sitting thereat, clad in her most glorious array, and behind her the Maid, standing humbly, yet clad in precious web of shimmering gold, but with feet unshod, and the iron ring upon her ankle. So Walter came his ways to the high seat, and the Lady rose and greeted him, and took him by the hands, and kissed him on either cheek, and sat him down beside her. So they fell to their meat, and the Maid served them, but the Lady took no more heed of her than if she were one of the pillars of the hall, but Walter she caressed oft with sweet words, and the touch of her hand, making him drink out of her cup, and eat out of her dish. As to him, he was bashful by seeming, but verily fearful. He took the Lady's caresses with what grace he might, and durst not so much as glance at her Maid. Long indeed seemed that banquet to him, and longer yet endured the weariness of his abiding there, kind to his foe, and unkind to his friend. For after the banquet they still sat a while, and the Lady talked much to Walter about many things of the ways of the world, and he answered what he might, distraught as he was with the thought of those two trysts which he had to deal with. At last spake the Lady, and said: "Now must I leave thee for a little, and thou wottest where and how we shall meet next, and meanwhile disport thee as thou wilt, so that thou weary not thyself, for I love to see thee joyous." Then she arose, stately and grand, but she kissed Walter on the mouth ere she turned to go out of the hall. The Maid followed her. But or ever she was quite gone, she stooped and made that sign, and looked over her shoulder at Walter, as if in entreaty to him, and there was fear and anguish in her face, but he nodded his head to her in yea say of the tryst in the hazel copse, and in a trice she was gone. Walter went down the hall, and forth into the early night. But in the jaws of the porch he came up against the King's son, who, gazing at his attire, glittering with all its gems in the moonlight, laughed out, and said: "Now may it be seen how thou art risen in degree above me, whereas I am but a king's son, and that a king of a far country; whereas thou art a king of kings, or shalt be this night, yea, and of this very country wherein we both are." Now Walter saw the mock which lay under his words, But he kept back his wrath, and answered: "Fair sir, art thou as well contented with thy lot as when the sun went down? Hast thou no doubt or fear? Will the Maid verily keep tryst with thee, or hath she given thee yea say but to escape thee this time? Or again, may she not turn to the Lady, and appeal to her against thee?" Now when he had spoken these words, he repented thereof, and feared for himself and the Maid, lest he had stirred some misgiving in that young man's foolish heart. But the King's Son did but laugh, and answered nought but to Walter's last words, and said: "Yea, yea, this word of thine showeth how little thou wottest of that which lieth betwixt my darling and thine. Doth the lamb appeal from the shepherd to the wolf? Even so shall the Maid appeal from me to thy Lady. What? Ask thy Lady at thy leisure what her wont hath been with her thrall; she shall think it a fair tale to tell thee thereof. But thereof is my Maid all whole now by reason of her wisdom in leechcraft, or somewhat more. And now I tell thee again that the beforesaid Maid must needs do my will. For if I be the deep sea, and I deem not so ill of myself, that other one is the devil. As belike thou shalt find out for thyself later on. Yea, all is well with me, and more than well." And therewith he swung merrily into the Litten hall. But Walter went out into the moonlit night, and wandered about for an hour or more, and stole warily into the hall, and thence into his own chamber. There he did off that royal array, and did his own raiment upon him. He girt him with sword and knife, took his bow and quiver, and stole down and out again, even as he had come in. Then he fetched a compass, and came down into the hazel coppice from the north, and lay hidden there while the night wore, till he deemed it would lack but little of midnight. CHAPTER 21. Walter and the Maid flee from the Golden House. There he abode amidst the hazels, hearkening every littlest sound, and the sounds were nought but the night voices of the wood, till suddenly there burst forth from the house a great wailing cry. Walter's heart came up into his mouth, but he had no time to do aught, for following hard on the cry came the sound of light feet close to him, the boughs were thrust aside, and there was come the Maid, and she but in her white coat and barefoot. And then first he felt the sweetness of her flesh on his, for she caught him by the hand, and said breathlessly: "Now, now! There may yet be time, or even too much it may be. For the saving of breath ask me no questions, but come." He dallied not, but went as she led, and they were light-foot, both of them. They went the same way, due south to wit, whereby he had gone a hunting with the Lady. And whiles they ran, and whiles they walked, but so fast they went, that by grey of the dawn they were come as far as that coppice or thicket of the Lion. And still they hastened onward, and but little had the Maid spoken, save here and there a word to hearten up Walter, and here and there a shy word of endearment. At last the dawn grew into early day, and as they came over the brow of a bent, they looked down over a plain land, whereas the trees grew scattermeal, and beyond the plain rose up the land into long green hills, and over those again were blue mountains, great and far away. Then spake the Maid: "Over yonder lie the outlying mountains of the Bears, and through them we needs must pass, to our great peril. Nay, friend," she said, as he handled his sword hilt, "it must be patience and wisdom to bring us through, and not the fallow blade of one man, though he be a good one. But look, Below there runs a stream through the first of the plain, and I see nought for it but we must now rest our bodies. Moreover, I have a tale to tell thee, which is burning my heart, for may be there will be a pardon to ask of thee moreover, wherefore I fear thee." Quoth Walter, "How may that be?" She answered him not, but took his hand and led him down the bent. But he said, "Thou sayest rest, but are we now out of all peril of the chase?" She said, "I cannot tell till I know what hath befallen her. If she be not to hand to set on her trackers, they will scarce happen upon us now, if it be not for that one." And she shuddered, and he felt her hand change as he held it. Then she said, "But peril or no peril, needs must we rest, for I tell thee again, what I have to say to thee burneth my bosom for fear of thee, so that I can go no further until I have told thee." Then he said, "I wot not of this Queen, and her mightiness, and her servants; I will ask thereof later. But besides the others, is there not the King's son, he who loves thee so unworthily?" She paled somewhat, and said, "As for him, there had been nought for thee to fear in him save his treason. But now shall he neither love nor hate any more. He died last midnight." "Yea, and how?" said Walter. "Nay," she said, "let me tell my tale altogether once for all, lest thou blame me overmuch. But first we will wash us, and comfort us as best we may, and then, amidst our resting, shall the word be said." By then were they come down to the stream side, which ran fair in pools and stickles amidst rocks and sandy banks. She said, "There behind the great grey rock is my bath, friend, and here is thine, and lo, the uprising of the sun." So she went her ways to the said rock, and he bathed him, and washed the night off him, and by then he was clad again. She came back fresh and sweet from the water, and with her lap full of cherries from a wilding which overhung her bath. So they sat down together on the green grass above the sand, and ate the breakfast of the wilderness, and Walter was full of content as he watched her, and beheld her sweetness and her loveliness. Yet were they, either of them, somewhat shy and shamefaced each with the other, so that he did but kiss her hands once and again, and though she shrank not from him, yet had she no boldness to cast herself into his arms. End of Section 7.